dear distinguished guests and audience, I would like to thank Abu Dhabi Art for having me today to talk about the art and the culture of Abu Dhabi. I would in particular like to thank the chairman, His Excellency Mohammed Al-Mubarak, and of course, Abu Dhabi Art Director Diala Seba. And I'm really honored to join curator Maya Al-Khalil and artist Afra Bahri, Afra Suwaidi, and Hind Mzena. And of course, we are all grateful for the Abu Dhabi Art team, including my good friend Noor Suwaidi. You see, Abu Dhabi Art is an hour and 20 minutes drive from Expo 2020 in Dubai, which is like all of our lives during 2020 was put on hold until the year 2021 because of COVID-19. While some of you will be in the UAE for the Expo, I fully recommend you make the trip to Abu Dhabi, the capital of the UAE, and fast becoming a major global destination for leisure, cultural, and business tourism. It is located on the borders of the empty quarter, where the highest sand dunes in the world. Abu Dhabi government is adopting many ambitious initiatives that reflect the advantages of the Emirate as a sustainable and competitive global destination that offers unparalleled travel and tourism options for the Emirati community, residents and visitors alike. I would like to emphasize all that Abu Dhabi Art has to offer for visitors. Abu Dhabi Art is a brilliant idea that emphasizes on the diverse public engagement programs, such as art installation, exhibitions, events, taking place in different venues throughout the year. I, as a passionate amateur artist, I believe that in what Abu Dhabi Art has to offer. I wish, it was there since the beginning, because it provides a platform and abundance of opportunities for both professionals and emerging artists who strive to further explore their talents, and bring their imagination to reality throughout a variety of events, including workshops and live performances. I love art and strongly believe that art is a means of communication between peoples and individuals. So with that, I sincerely pledge my full support for Abu Dhabi Art and look forward to having a display soon to share some of my own art work with you. Today, Abu Dhabi Art is emerging as an important hub for promoting art and culture. I would invite you all to visit Abu Dhabi Art during your time in the UAE. It offers more than just artistic events with dynamic and diverse cultural initiatives where you can enjoy art, live performances, music, dance, poetry, crafts, paintings, and lecture. I'm sure, as you'll find out this event. So I'll give the floor to Maya so she can take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Good morning from Oxford, different time zones. When I was invited to curate Beyond Emerging Artists for Abu Dhabi Art, I really felt privileged to be working with emerging artists. I think the process is always a learning process on both sides. And I learned a lot from the three artists today, Afra Dahiri, Afra Swaidi, and Hind Mzaina. when we started working, it was an idea to discover what the practice of each one of these artists was. And even though they're quite distinctive in their practice, and we did not set any theme in advance, and nor did I think of bringing them together on one concept or curated concept. Despite all of that, the three of them decided to explore the past, its composition, its impact, in a way also building some sort of reconciliation with what has been. And for me, it was a bit strange because at the time, especially for a nation that is known for new horizons, for rapid change, for swift development, to realize that I was expecting for these artists to look maybe to address issues in the future, or issues of technology, or of time, or of or issues that are happening now. But probably what one of them was telling me is that they've lived their youth in a society that was rapidly changing, great acceleration, and there's a sense of speeding time. So in this context, it felt that making sense of the past was more about participating better in the present and really imagining the future. So each of these artists has engaged in a process characterized by shifting ideas and perspective. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of ongoing back and forth. The works that are presented as works in progress. They are set to evolve across the coming months. And we decided to go down this road because, first of all, during lockdown, we didn't have enough time to put together to fully think of an exhibition for a year. But this is also more interesting because to reveal a work in progress for an artist is to reveal a sense of vulnerability. And I think what this crisis and this pandemic revealed is that we are all vulnerable. So to put out to start an exhibition with work that is not finished at a time where, in a world where it seems to always demand the best of ourselves, in a relentless development, improvement, and achievement, I think it's to reach out. It's to reach out and to bring in the different communities. And I think at this particular time, this is extremely important. I'm going to leave the floor to the artists because I think they have the most important messages to communicate. We start with Afra Dahiri. Afra, you're going to talk about your practice, but also the point of departure for this exhibition, for this work, was a staircase, a spiral staircase. And this actually, in a way, this architectural detail linked to another structure that is very close to you. But also it links to this movement of between up and down, between past, present, and future, which is very much the sense of time that you've always addressed in your practice. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Maya, and thank you, Your Excellency. I wanted to talk about, when talking about my work, I wanted to start with a work that first put me in a position to think about time, or I would say the first time that I actually dealt with this idea of fast pace, as you mentioned, Maya, living and in an accelerated pace that we were living in the UAE. This time was actually during the time when I was pursuing my MFA at Rhode Island School of Design in the US. I happened to learn a new skill, a new technique, which is glass casting and pouring. And in this particular work that you see on the screen, I started to question the time that I spent in the US allowed me to think about, to kind of like take myself outside the perspective of my country, my family and culture in the UAE, and look at it from a perspective, from a far perspective. And I realized during the times when I was going back for holidays in the UAE, I would notice that a lot of things had shifted and changed while I've only been away for 2-3 months. And it was quite surprising for me, which made me think about time a lot. And I started working in this piece particularly. And so with this particular piece, if you see in the slide before it, I used glass as a material to stop time. So my mother had sent me this cup and for my apartment there, and I remembered a moment that I had with my grandmother when I was younger. I was pouring tea inside my cup, and my cup broke due to the difference in temperature between the cup and the tea. And it just ruptured, and my grandmother instantly shouted at me and she said, "Why are you impatient? Well, who's running after you?" And she said, "Warm your cup, take your time." And that moment really triggered me, and I realized that that rupture is that moment of impatience, and that happened in the 90s when time was still slower than what we're talking about today. And so I wanted to reenact this with material. And so glass actually, it's hot, it pours very quickly, but it also solidifies very quickly. And so I reenacted it in allowing the glass to break this porcelain cup, but then becomes almost as a way to preserve it and hold it together. And I called it preserving impatience for that reason. And so as I moved on, I also set this idea of time, slowing down time, became more and more interesting to me, and it became almost like a purpose. I wanted to slow down my practice. I wanted to experience my work for longer moments. I realized that this fast pace started to alter the way that I memorize things. My memory became less vivid of things that happened last month and last year, but more vivid of things that I've experienced when I was 10 or 15. And so as I moved on, I happened to do a residency at Porthmeor Studios in Cornwall last year. And I was thinking, I had this huge studio and I was thinking, what would I make there? But I decided to limit myself. I decided to work on paper and only paper. And I forced myself to work on only these pieces. I usually work simultaneously with a lot of different materials at a time. And I realized I wanted to focus. I wanted to take my process at a much slower pace. And I started making these hair drawings where I would collect my hair that had fallen. So I allow it to take the natural process of it being on my head and then falling eventually. But when the hair falls, and spending more time thinking about hair as something that is not temporary, it's a material that is permanent in a sense. When we die, the hair is the only thing that does not decay. And so I looked at that and started using it as a material in my work and applying it to paper and creating these lines with the hair, allowing the hair to just, wander on the surface and create the composition that it wants. And then I would meditate by only mixing my colors and enjoying and painting these compositions, these forms that the hair creates. And in doing so, I started to think about when I apply the hair with a medium, which is similar to glue, I brush it on, there's a force that happens and takes place. So the hair extends, we change the way that the hair exists. But as soon as I put water onto it, it retracts instantly, and it retracts instantly, wanting to go back to the form that it remembers itself as. So there is that momentarily kind of situation where I realized that hair also has memory. It has the capacity to memorize and has the capacity to kind of retract and go back to the form that it remembers itself as. And that to me was incredible. And arriving to the work that I've created for this commission and working with Maya, talking about all of these moments. And during this pandemic, I was given time in a sense, especially during lockdown. I was granted back that time. I was granted back that slowness of time, and I was reminded by the 90s. It was very nostalgic feeling, the sense of time. And so I started applying, if you see in the slide before this one, I started applying hair, detangling it first and then applying it one at a time. So I am experiencing the slowness of this time even further, examining and understanding hair. And each hair strand becomes to suggest the time, the length of it starts to suggest the years that it had grown on my head. And for example, these works that I'm presenting today are actually 5-year long hair. And so the hair becomes a representative of time. And in this work, I wanted to materialize the hair work in a grander scale. I wanted to upscale it. I wanted to emphasize on the labor that the woman goes through in dealing with hair, the different connotations of hair in different cultures. Hair has different representations in different cultures and similarities in different cultures. And I think particularly from where I stand, I had a moment where in my younger years in school, my mother would braid my hair and I had a very thick braid, and I felt ashamed because it was different than all the other students who were in my class, and I used to hide it. But I realized that there's a lot of labor, there's a lot of weight that the woman takes within the culture that we live in. It's almost as if women are bearers of the culture weight, but then in a very beautiful and poetic way. So I enlarged the work. I started using rope as hair and treating the rope as hair to really start to mimic the hair and its movement and its weight and the way it works. So I installed this piece yesterday, and as you can only imagine, the labor and the labor intensive work that it took for me to actually deal with all this rope and braiding it. Yeah. And I called it tasriha, which is styling your hair for a good event.
Thank you so much, Afra. It's beautiful work. I'm sorry I won't be able to see it, but it is on view. Actually, it's the only exhibition, it's the only part of the program of Abu Dhabi Art that is actually a physical exhibition. So, and whoever is in the UAE today, I would urge them to go and visit it. We moved to Afra Swedi. Afra, if you've worked about also you use fragments of memories, and you tell a lot of hidden stories, stories of the past, or stories that create some sort of a cohesive sense of self. Can you tell us a little bit more about your practice?
Sure. So I'm gonna start. I'm not good with words as I'm good with my hands. So I hope that you are patient and with my train of thoughts. It should be like late for 3 or 2 minutes. Sorry, seconds. So yeah, let's start. So basically my work is all about I'm tackling the issue of abuse in the society, basically, whether it's in the UAE or like it's not it is a worldwide issue. So I'm tackling it in a way that the viewers or the audience in our society that gets it in a very subtle way. And so in these work, previously I had these works, and like my practice was about experimenting with the childhood period, uh, uh, if they like when they put in a situation where they physically abuse in their domestic places or in their private places. So it is about the human reaction and reaction and the aftermath after this specific situation. So I try to play with the idea of uh, what's safe, what's unsafe, what's comfortable for the eyes, what's not comfortable, like layering my canvases or my work with like two, three layers, like hiding, revealing, and adding some materials and to mold the shape that I want. And the next slide that you'll see these like out of colors works that it is out of life, or like it's not fluffy, it's not innocent, it's not childish no more. So I am using plaster. I am using plaster because like the like this medium, it's really serves well my concept, my ideas about time. And like with time the medium will yellow, or like the color will change, the it might be fragile, or like it might crack, as the same as the human condition. It could be changed over time. And I am tackling the same issues for Abu Dhabi Art with my collages. Uh, so basically, at first, when you see it from a distance, you'll see a whole collage. They are like knotted on panels, and they are placed on a row, like behind each other. They are very close they are very close to each other, like creating small pathway between them. It leaves the viewer to question whether they are should enter like this tight place or not, like to have a look uh, uh, to have a look at a private, or like private, or like closed basically story. And they are echoes architecture structures that evokes the sense of confined places, whether they are public, they are domestic, they are private. And with these collages I used a very personal materials, such as pants, makeup bags, plastic bags, clothes, like lots of textile. And in a way or another, like all of these collages are so emotional, like they translate the emotions of the person who got abused, or like he went through this issue, basically, like burning the mediums, like etching the paper, and like even the stitching the materials together. Like they are like I stitch them in a very wild way, like, and then so yeah. And this is like the final installation. I hope that whoever like can go and see it, and then like people can experience the feeling, or like the emotions that I'm talking about.
Thank you so much, Afra. This is, I'm going to stay with you, Afra, because I would like you to just tell me a little bit what your title means, because you included under your title a quote by an author that I think a lot of us will recognize. It's an excerpt by Khalil Gibran on children, and it says, "You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow."
Yeah. So basically, the idea behind this quote, it is like an idea of parenting, or like when you give a birth to a child, like until he grows up, and like until he form, or like create his own independent personality. Like before this period, like you can educate him, you can like if you want to transplant the ideas, like the proper ideas, the cultural ideas, the whatsoever ideas, you can do that. But like after like this human being, like uh, to be as an independent entity, or like an independent individual, like you should leave him, like you gave birth of the body, like you molded his thoughts and his ideas about anything that you want. But like after this period, or like after this level, you just can't control this human being no more, because for sure like he'll create his own ideas based on the ideas that you transplant in him, basically. And after that, like you should, or like every parent should set their kids free, basically, to create their own thing, to think like freely about like the ideas that they have, yeah.
Thank you. This is fascinating. Yes, I remember you were telling me that their thoughts, their minds, especially with imagination and creativity, they belong to the future. And I found this really poetic. Thank you, Afra. Um, moving from really between talking about hair as a frontier between the private and the public, and it is an extension of the body, so it is a frontier. Afra, Swedi, you talked about the body as a frontier between hidden stories and the outside. And the body is a frontier between the person and the national. You started as a starting point the UAE participation in 1980 World Disco Championship in London, and that triggered a whole process of looking at archives and storytelling. But can you tell us more about your practice? But also, I think it fits so beautifully with the blog that you're holding, The Culturist, and you also have a podcast about tea with culture. So within all of this, I think it would be quite interesting to see how that translated into this project.
Thank you, Maya. And yeah, thank you everyone for organizing this session. Yeah, I mean, I think I wear multiple hats at different times. So, you know, as an artist, as a blogger, as a podcaster, I do film programming. And for the longest time, I think I would treat each identity separate. And it's only recently that I realized actually they should be spoken about together because they are interlinked. You know, all of it feeds into my practice. So, you know, the blog, for example, that I do is about culture that started in 2009. And as an artist, I think I focused on it maybe from 2014, where before that I was maybe part-time artist because I was also working full-time in the corporate world. But after leaving that, that's when, you know, I kind of decided also to focus as an artist. But along with that, as you mentioned, you know, I do the blog, I do a podcast, and over the past couple of years, the film programming. As a, you know, lifelong cinephile, I'm glad that has led to me to program film screenings. And the core of it, maybe the past couple of years, was in Louvre, Abu Dhabi, but I've also, you know, organized film screenings in other venues as well. And it really plays a big part in a lot of what I see and engage with, you know, all the time. As for my kind of practice as an artist, like photography, I think has been a core, has been big in my life. Like I've always had a camera. I mean, even as, you know, as a teen. So I've always had a camera. I've always been photographing, and just, you know, taking it seriously was something just from 2000 onwards. And it's always been about my relationship with the city, and the city being Dubai, where I'm from. And it is because what we talked about, that it's constantly changing. You know, things disappear, and this kind of, and maybe I use photography as a way of, you know, preserving memory, right? And over time, I've been interested in themes of collective memory and the notion of heritage and representation of Dubai, you know, and the UAE in the media, and more so, I think, from post 2000. So when, so the first opportunity I had after I quit my full-time job was I was one of the artists in residence for Art Dubai. So that was in 2015. And with that, I for the first time, I made a video piece. And it included my photography. It included images of old postcards. It included text that I found from forums, from articles, and it was my voice reading them. And it was like a little essay. And the title of the piece is, It May Have Been Where the Tales of Sinbad and Aladdin Came From. And this line came from a press release about a new development that was called Aladdin City, which I think has been shelved. But I was very fascinated by that line, and I like kind of taking that line. So again, what is being projected in media and in PR, and how does that reflect, on the ground? So this was this is just like some of the images from that video. And in 2016, I was one of the participants of the Sheikh Salama Emerging Artist Fellowship. And one of the works I did was, I took a whole series of new postcards. So current postcards, especially out of Dubai, focus on, Burj Khalifa, and that's kind of like the central image of what Dubai is on postcards, whereas in my previous work where you saw it was always the creek, right? So that was the heart of the city, and so it's a completely different shift. And so I kind of wanted to create my version of these contemporary postcards where I overlaid them with architectural patterns of existing buildings. Well, I hope they're still around. I mean, I haven't been to kind of certain parts of Dubai in a while, but it was just kind of imprinting the architecture, which I feel is overlooked over the architecture that's always being projected in all in all discussions about the city. And another work I did also that was part of the fellowship was also a video piece. And again, it's all from existing footage, and I called it Dancing Girls. And this was really about representation of Gulf women in pop culture, like past and present. And it was about the hair dance. So, maybe a link to Afra al-Dhari's work. So the hair dance and how it used to be performed by young women. And over time, they just started being performed by younger and younger girls. And I don't know, and I kind of was thinking about these images. It's around 1 minute, and I overlaid it with a contemporary song, a Kylie Minogue song for anyone in Australia, Kylie Minogue. And yeah, it's a 1 minute video. It's playful, it's fun, but it's just something to kind of interrogate and think about these, different clips put together and creating new meanings. In 2017, I was happy and honored to be part of the Sharjah Biennial. And again, I was looking at the city, and in this time from in terms of green spaces, and what do green spaces mean? How are they built? How are they constructed? And a lot of it, either it's really manicured green spaces, which is, decorative. And I noticed also green spaces which are more, creating borders, like it's covering something. And there are green spaces which is, where you can sit and have, some peaceful time, as refuge. And what I did was during these drives or walks around the city, I would pick up fallen leaves and flowers, and I followed like this extremely old-fashioned way of imprinting images on paper. So cyanotype, where I put it on chemically treated paper, and basically it kind of just leaves a permanent mark of what you leave on that paper. So with that, I created a series of these prints. I called it Dubai Gardens, and Dubai Gardens in Dubai is also a name of a development. So again, I'm taking kind of commenting on the constant development and new projects and just putting it in a context of an artwork. And with this piece, it was also paired with some writing by a collaborator and a friend called Todd Rees, who's an architect and a writer, and his work focuses on Gulf cities. So it was a pairing of, these images and text, which were kind of like, very poetic, very touching, kind of, like 5, short paragraphs about the city. And again, more to do with the city, and again, using the name of an existing kind of development in Dubai. It's called Dubai Hills. And this is a piece which is a collage of like photos I've taken. And I just want to say, like, all the photos I normally take are on film. So I'm an old school photographer, only because that's how I got into photography. Like, digital came much later. And with these, I called it Dubai Hills. And it was something I was thinking about, you know, what is our existing landscapes, you know, driving around Dubai, there's always pile of sand and rubble because of construction sites. And I kind of started owning them a bit, but I think, wait, these are our landscapes. These are our city landscapes. And I went up close to some of them, and I kind of, like, I think I distorted, you know, like the way I took these photos is to distort the angles of what these rubbles look like and make an imagined kind of landscape of hills and mountains in the city. And this was done, actually, it was commissioned for a specific exhibition called Is Old Gold. It was in 2017. And now moving to the present and the now. And process was a big item here because of, you know, what Maya said. And it's the first time I think I'm doing something where it's not finished and it's going to be work. So there is definitely an element of vulnerability. And I'm curious to see how people respond to this piece. And the starting point, as Maya mentioned earlier, is the disco competition that a little clip from it went viral in the UAE because someone kind of spotted it on YouTube. And that clip stayed with me. And over research, I found out there was another competition in 1984, which also had a UAE participant. And when they called him out, his job title was typed out on the screen, and he's an immigration officer. So, so there's, you know, it's just, that kind of competition made me wonder, would the UAE participate in a competition like that today? Would the UAE send someone to represent them in a disco competition today? What is dancing? What is approved representation of national dancing versus from a national level and from an individual level? And the entire clip, the entire piece at the moment is 8 minutes long. I'm hoping it'll be longer. It will evolve. It will change over the next couple of months. And it's a series of, you know, found images, stock images, memes, movie clips, and I put them all together, all of them playing on masculinity and all of them playing on dancing out of the region, but I think UAE specific. So what you're seeing now is just still like several stills from the piece that I've put together. But if you're in or near Abu Dhabi, go take a look, but also bear in mind, it is still a work in progress. And one last note about the piece is the title. So again, I kind of think very hard about the title and why I chose these titles. And this one's called A Performance of Valor. And I found it on the Abu Dhabi culture website because there was a whole section about the different heritage events and heritage dancing. And for the Ayala, the title was A Performance of Valor. So I thought that was an interesting title to put in the context of the piece I'm working and thinking about, and probably will be continuing to think about over the next couple of months. So that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Hind. Please, I'd like to remind our audience that feel free to ask questions. Actually, we welcome your questions to the artist. I still haven't seen any on screen in the Q&A, but meanwhile, we're talking about change. It's a question that I'm asking the three of you. We're talking about change, but how do you express permanence? At one point, I think Afra were talking, Afra, you mentioned permanence. So what does permanence mean to you and today, and how do you express it in your work? We start with, who would like to start? Afra Dahiri.
Okay. I think that it's something that I struggle with, to be honest, when I think of permanence, because I feel like an overpowering word takes over permanence, which is ephemerality. And I think that looking back, I was born in 88 and I lived throughout like the first 10 years of my life in the 90s, and I feel like those were very prominent to my development. And go thinking back about, like looking back, trying to find the place, the playground I played in, or the arcade that I went to, or there's no relationship. The landscape changes and it becomes, everything had become ephemeral. Our memory is deconstructing these memories. And, you know, as when you collect or register memory, sometimes your recollections are constructions that your mind is making. And I feel that that becomes a struggle. And there's a word in Arabic that I use a lot in this particular body of work, but also like in my studio, which is sira. You know, it's a constant struggle. And I feel like the word struggle in English does not do this justice. But I think that's my relationship to permanence, is that it's ephemeral. It almost does not exist. There's new things that come onto the landscape, and it's almost as if it's on a ticking clock. When will it be down again and something else is going to take its place?
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Afra,
I know.
Saidi? Oh, Hind, yes.
Sorry, okay, sorry, me
Hind?
too. I don't
No,
know.
no,
I
no, it's
think
fine,
it's
perfect.
I mean, I think not, I mean, the only, I mean, nothing should stay permanent. Otherwise, you know, like nothing will develop. So you know, but I think it's the pace and how often. And I think it's this lack of feeling settled, right? Like, I mean, even this past few months, despite us, this whole, you know, we're at home and lockdown, and I mean, things have slightly changed and, you know, improved, at least out of Dubai. But there's still constant construction and work, you know. I'm like, and at one point I was driving, I was with my mom, like, when will this all stop? When will the city feel settled, right? When will it feel settled, where I don't feel like every turn there's, you know, sand dug out, you know, borders. And I know, and you know, the image of the city is very different to when it's portrayed in media, right? So it's only like certain parts of town and the high rise. But the reality is, yeah, you know, like there's dugout work, there's, you know, road works, and it's all, it's for the development of the city, and it's great, but it's constantly, it's constant. Whereas I feel like if I travel and I go to a city in Europe, I feel relaxed. I feel a bit, and it's not my city. It's not, you know, some of them, I don't speak the language, but I'm at ease because just something feels like, maybe using the word permanent, something feels that exists, that isn't disappearing. So I think it's more about, like I said, nothing is permanent, but it's just this, how to feel settled, like how to feel at ease in a place where the speed of change is more than one can keep up with. And I think, and the older you get, the more you feel it, right? And I'm a lot older than, you know, my two you know, artists here, and you know, because I was born in the 70s, and so in the 80s, where, you know, life was slow and relaxed, and you know, and then in the 90s it started picking up, and then 2000 onwards it just went into overdrive, you know. So I faced, you know, going through it as a child, as a teen, and as an adult, and it's mostly as an adult where I'm, you know, this accelerated level of change. But Dubai has always been changing, right? I mean, that's one of the, I think, the nice things about it. But I think it's the pace of how fast the changes are, where it's very hard to you know, reconcile with
the process. Afra, you're the youngest in the team. What does permanence, does it mean anything to you?
To be
You're
honest,
muted, Afra. Can you unmute
yeah.
yourself?
Is it like, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So permanent, it is a big word to use. I don't believe like in something that's permanent, because like my work is all about emotions are like not permanent, situations are not permanent, memories are not permanent. So if you had I don't know, like a memory of yesterday, like I don't know, after 20 years, like you might have a glimpse of it, but like not the whole scenario or like the whole idea. So like yeah, like permanent, it is something, is like everything is changing around us. And like permanent, I don't use this word, I don't use it basically, and I don't use it, just like, yeah, there is nothing permanent as like as simple as that. And yeah.
Yes, I agree. And yet we are trying. It's like through our buildings, through our structures, sometimes we are trying to address that idea of, or fight that idea of ephemerality. Excellency, I have a question from Excellency. Would you like to ask it or shall I ask it?
Actually, that's not from me. I'm not sure exactly.
Okay,
But
I'm sorry, then I made it. Did you have a question?
I just want to make a comment that this idea of past and present in time and the use of all these different mediums is very interesting to me, and I honestly can't wait to see the actual estimation. Very inspiring, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we wrap it up, I'm just going to have a very quick question because I have a question here from the public. How much do you struggle with self-censorship in your work with regards to your fears about crossing the vague red lines in the UAE? I think we're all self-censored anyway, but it's like, how do you address that in your work?
Can I say something?
Yes, Afra.
I always look back. I mean, this is something I feel like we're always self-conscious about, and we're always very much aware about how much we censor and what we censor. But I do believe that our culture there are cultural values, and we were, I would say, raised to respect boundaries and respect other people's intimacies versus your intimacy. I think there is to some extent a freedom of what you want to express, but you have to have respect to the other, like your audience or whatnot. So I feel like it becomes subconscious that we censor. It becomes subconscious that we become less giving. But I also think, I teach at the university, and I see my students how very much liberated they are, and they're fearless and I look at myself being in that university like 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, like we were not like that, but these ladies are fierce, they're fearless, they're liberated, they're speaking their minds. And I think, honestly, it's amazing.
Thank you. Hind?
Yeah, self-censorship. I don't know. It's a very loaded question, and I think there are like certain boundaries. Who what to say, what not to say, and also I think where to say and where not to say it. So it's something. I think we were all. I think, as Afra said, I think we're all like it's just something almost ingrained in us, and yes, there is an element of whether it's culture and respect, but also an element of not, I don't want to say stirring trouble, but also being more vocal about issues, and how ready are people or society ready to tackle these issues, so I think nothing should be forced on anyone. It shouldn't be, because it then loses its impact. So, if there are subtle ways of addressing, something that feels sensitive, that's great. I've at least from experience where, if you're very upfront about it, it doesn't solve anything. But I think it's something a lot of, people, especially I think in the art, especially anyone in the creative field where expression, right? So self-expression, and how much of the self can be expressed and how much of it you have to hold back a little or do it in bits and pieces. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Hind. I'm conscious about time. I'm being asked to wrap up. After Sir, did you want to add anything on this topic or no? Okay.
No. I'm good. I agree with Hafra.
You've expressed it all along in this subject anyway. Fantastic. Excellency, thank you so much for hosting us. It's really a privilege being here today with these artists, with you, with the audience in Australia, and I think New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maya. This has been very informative. This is just, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a taste for what Abu Dhabi Art has to offer. I'm grateful for Hindem Zaina, Afra Swedi, and Afra Bahri for sharing with us some really interesting work and maybe inspiring. I know I'm inspired. Maybe, you know, I love the quote by, since we invoked Khalil Gibran from the Prophet. He has a, you know, I always like the quote, the deeper that sorrow carves into our beings is the more joy you can contain. Is not the cup that holds your drink, the very cup that was burned in the potter's oven, and is not the lute that soothes your spirits, the very wood that was hollowed with knives. And I feel that what we heard from you, each experience is very similar echoes, each unique experience. And it has been an honor. I hope to see you guys in person and to see your work. And I wish you all good luck. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.